Jake Morrison sat in the cold metal chair and tried not to show his anger. The chair was too small for humans, like everything else on the Galactic Council station. After 23 years of meetings, the aliens still had not bothered to get furniture that fit human bodies properly. Across the curved table sat 12 alien beings. Each one looked down at Jake like he was a child asking for candy. The hegemony representative, Vextar, had 4 arms and skin like gray leather. His yellow eyes never blinked as he spoke in his mechanical voice. "The council has made its decision," Vextar announced. His translator made his words sound flat and cold. "Humanity will be granted observer status level 2. Jake felt his aide, Lieutenant Karen White, tense up beside him. She had been taking notes on her tablet, but her fingers stopped moving. Jake knew what observer status level 2 meant. It was basically a fancy way of saying humans could watch the aliens make decisions, but could never vote on anything important. Level 2 means you can attend meetings about trade disputes and colony permits, Vextar continued. You cannot vote on military matters, territorial expansion, or technology sharing agreements. This status will be reviewed in 50 Earth years. 50 years. Jake had been Earth's ambassador for 8 years already. He would be dead before humanity got another chance at real membership. His children would be old before the council even looked at their request again. The Crystalline Confederacy representative, a being made of living crystal that rang like bells when it moved, added its voice. Humanity has shown promise in basic engineering and agriculture. These are suitable areas for a developing species. Perhaps in time you will advance enough for greater responsibility. Jake's hands tightened on the armrests of his chair. Basic engineering. They called human technology basic engineering. Humans had helped design half the systems on this very station. Earth's fusion reactors powered 3 council worlds. Human medical advances had saved millions of alien lives. But to these beings, humans were still primitive cave dwellers who had gotten lucky. Vextar pulled up a holographic display that showed human colonies throughout the galaxy. Red markers indicated supervised territories, where other council species would now have authority over human settlements. The Vorthan Empire will oversee human mining operations in the Kepler system, Vextar read from his notes. The Silicon Brotherhood will manage human research stations in the Proxima region. The Aquatic Collective will supervise human shipping through the Vega trade routes. Each word felt like a slap to Jake's face. Human miners who had spent decades digging rare metals from asteroids would now take orders from Vorthan overseers. Human scientists making breakthrough discoveries would have their work claimed by Silicon Brotherhood masters. Human merchant captains would need permission from fish-like aliens to carry cargo through space routes they had discovered themselves. This arrangement ensures proper development of human potential while protecting established galactic order. The crystal being chimed. Young species often make dangerous mistakes without guidance. Jake looked around the circular chamber. The walls displayed images of great council achievements, new worlds terraformed, trade routes established, wars prevented through diplomacy. But Jake knew the real story behind those pretty pictures. Most of the terraforming used human atmospheric processors. The trade routes followed paths mapped by human explorers. The wars had been prevented because human negotiators found solutions that worked for everyone. But humans got no credit. Their names appeared nowhere on the official records. Earth was treated like a helpful servant that occasionally had good ideas. Karen leaned over and whispered in Jake's ear, "Sir, should I prepare the standard diplomatic response?" For 23 years, Earth's ambassadors had given standard diplomatic responses. They had smiled politely and thanked the council for their wisdom. They had accepted insults with grace and swallowed their pride for the greater good. They had played the part of grateful primitives who were honored to serve their betters. Jake looked at Vexatar's smug face. The alien was already turning to discuss the next item on his agenda. Humanity's fate had been decided in less than 10 minutes. 23 years of negotiations dismissed like an annoying interruption. "Ambassador Morrison," Vextar said without looking up from his notes. "Please acknowledge your species' acceptance of this generous arrangement." "Generous?" Jake almost laughed. They were taking control of human colonies and calling it generous. He thought about the message he had received from Earth that morning. Admiral Lisa Grant had sent it through encrypted channels that the Council did not know existed. The message was simple. Packages ready for delivery, awaiting your signal. Jake had wondered if this day would ever come. For 8 years, he had hoped that patience and diplomacy would eventually work. He had believed that proving human worth through quiet service would earn respect. He had been wrong. The other council members were barely paying attention now. The Aquatic Collective representative was reading reports on his personal device. The Silicon Brotherhood delegate had started a side conversation about mineral rights. To them, humanity was just another item to check off their list. Jake stood up slowly. The sudden movement made several aliens look in his direction. He reached for the diplomatic pin on his jacket lapel. The small golden symbol showed Earth surrounded by olive branches, the universal symbol of peace. His fingers closed around the pin. For 8 years, it had represented humanity's hopes and dreams. It had been a symbol of their desire to join the galactic community as equals. Now it felt like a collar that marked him as a pet. Jake pulled the pin from his jacket and placed it carefully on the metal table. The small sound it made seemed very loud in the quiet chamber. "Lieutenant White," he said in a calm voice, "please send a message to Earth. Tell them the kids' gloves are coming off." Karen's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded and began typing on her secure communicator. The other council members watched with mild curiosity. They had no idea what the human phrase meant. Vextar tilted his head. "Ambassador, what is the meaning of this gesture?" Jake looked directly into the alien's yellow eyes. "It means, Counselor Vextar, that humanity is done being polite." He turned and walked toward the chamber exit. Karen followed close behind, her fingers still dancing across her communicator. The council members watched them leave with confused expressions. They had no idea that Jake Morrison had just declared war on the entire galactic order. They had no idea that Earth had been preparing for this moment since the day humans first made contact with alien life. Most importantly, they had no idea what humans were really capable of when they stopped pretending to be harmless. Admiral Lisa Grant was drinking coffee in her office when the secure message arrived. The Pentagon's Deep Space Communications Center was 3 floors underground, surrounded by enough metal and electronics to block signals from anywhere in the galaxy. But this message had come through channels that officially did not exist. The text was short and simple. "Kids' gloves are coming off. JM." Lisa set down her coffee mug and stared at the screen. She had been waiting for this message for 8 years. Part of her had hoped it would never come. The other part of her had been preparing for nothing else. She pressed a button on her desk. Within seconds, her aide appeared in the doorway. "Get me Dr. Tony Clark and tell him it's Protocol 7, Lisa said. "And wake up the night shift, all of them." The aide's face went pale. Protocol 7 was the code that every senior military officer hoped they would never hear. It meant that diplomacy had failed completely. It meant that Earth was about to show the galaxy what humans could really do. 20 minutes later, Dr. Tony Clark arrived at Lisa's office. He looked like a typical scientist with his thick glasses and messy hair. Most people who met him thought he studied alien languages or maybe space geology. They had no idea that he ran the most secret organization in human history. "How long do we have?" Tony asked as he sat down across from Lisa's desk. "Jake will try to buy us 72 hours, Lisa replied. "But we should assume less." Tony nodded and pulled out a device that looked like an ordinary tablet. His fingers moved across the screen in patterns that would have meant nothing to an outside observer. But each gesture was sending coded signals to human agents across 17 different star systems. "The Watchers are getting their wake-up calls," Tony said. "How many do you think we'll need?" Lisa looked at the star charts displayed on her wall. Red dots marked Council military bases. Blue dots showed major trade routes. Yellow dots indicated the positions of Council government officials. There were hundreds of targets spread across thousands of light years. "All of them," she said. While Tony worked on his tablet, Lisa opened her own secure communication system. The first call went to Captain Amy Rodriguez, who was supposed to be commanding a simple cargo transport somewhere near the hegemony border. Amy's face appeared on the screen. She was sitting in what looked like the bridge of a merchant vessel, complete with worn seats and patched-up control panels. But Lisa could see the truth in Amy's eyes. The woman was a predator pretending to be prey. "Admiral," Amy said with a slight smile, "I was wondering when you'd call." "Status report, Captain. The Silent Thunder has been shadowing the Hegemony flagship for 6 months. They still think we're hauling grain and medical supplies to the outer colonies. We've mapped every system on their ship and tracked their patrol routes. When you give the word, we can disable their entire fleet without firing a shot." Lisa nodded. The Silent Thunder was one of 12 human ships that had been playing the role of harmless merchants, while actually carrying enough firepower to level planets. Each ship was equipped with technology that the Council believed was impossible. Her next call went to Commander Sam Taylor, who was officially running a human research station near the Silicon Brotherhood's home system. Unofficially, he commanded a battle group that had been hiding in empty space for 3 years. "Sam, it's time to come out of the shadows." The commander's grin was fierce. "My people have been getting restless, Admiral. We've been watching Brotherhood. Ships come and go, learning their tactics. They fight like they're still using weapons from 1,000 years ago. This is going to be easy." Lisa's final call was to someone the Council had never heard of. Colonel Janet Pierce ran human special operations throughout the galaxy. For 20 years, she had been placing agents in key positions on every Council world. "Janet, how many assets do we have in place?" "Every Council station has at least 5 humans in critical positions," Janet replied. "Most of their computer technicians are our people. Half of their communications specialists work for us. We've got humans maintaining their power systems, their air recyclers, their food processors. When we flip the switch, their entire infrastructure will be under our control." Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. She had known that humanity was preparing for this day, but hearing the scope of their infiltration still amazed her. For 2 decades, while aliens treated humans like simple servants, those servants had been quietly taking control of everything that kept galactic civilization running. "How long until we're ready?" Lisa asked. Tony looked up from his tablet. "The activation codes are going out now. Every watcher will be in position within 12 hours. Our ships are moving to their attack coordinates. The computer viruses are ready to deploy." Lisa walked to the window of her underground office. It was not a real window, just a screen that showed the surface of Earth far above. She could see the lights of cities and the glow of orbital stations. For 8 years, she had wondered if she would ever see those lights again. The galaxy thought Earth was a small, unimportant world with basic technology and simple people. They had no idea that human civilization extended far beyond their home planet. They did not know about the hidden colonies, the secret shipyards, or the research stations that had been developing weapons beyond alien imagination. Most importantly, they did not know that humans had been studying them for nearly a century before making first contact. "Admiral," Tony said quietly, "the Watchers are reporting something interesting. Council communications are starting to have problems. Random delays, corrupted messages, system failures. They think it's just normal technical difficulties." Lisa smiled. "How long before they realize what's happening?" "If they're smart, maybe 6 hours. If they're as arrogant as usual, they might never figure it out." She turned back to her desk and opened a secure channel to every human military base, research station, and colony in the galaxy. Hundreds of faces appeared on her screen. Ship captains, station commanders, special forces leaders, intelligence operatives. Most of them looked like ordinary humans doing ordinary jobs. But Lisa knew better. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "after 23 years of playing nice, it's time to show our neighbors what humanity is really made of. You all know your assignments. You've trained for this day since you were children. Make me proud." One by one, the faces disappeared as commanders signed off to begin their missions. Lisa was left alone with Tony and the weight of what they were about to unleash. "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" Tony asked. Lisa thought about Jake Morrison sitting in that cold chair, being told that humans were too primitive for real responsibility. She thought about human colonies being handed over to alien overseers. She thought about human achievements being credited to other species. The aliens had their chance to treat us as equals, she said. They chose to treat us as children instead. Now they get to learn what happens when the children grow up. Counselor Vextar was enjoying his morning meal when his aide burst into his private chambers. The young hegemony officer looked terrified, his forearms shaking as he tried to speak. "Counselor, we have a problem," the aide stammered. 3 of our supply convoys have vanished." Vextar set down his nutrition cube and fixed his yellow eyes on the messenger. "Define vanished." "Gone, sir. No distress signals, no wreckage, no trace." The convoy to Kepler 438b was supposed to arrive 6 hours ago. The ships heading to our mining station at Wolf 359 never reached their destination, and the fleet carrying weapons to our border patrol just disappeared. The counselor felt a cold sensation in his chest. 3 convoys did not simply vanish. Each one had been protected by military escorts and equipped with the best sensors in the galaxy. Something had destroyed them completely, leaving no evidence behind. "Have you contacted the other council members?" Vextar asked. "That's the other problem, sir. Our communications are experiencing severe difficulties. Messages are being delayed or corrupted. Some transmissions are not getting through at all." Vextar stood up and walked to his window. Outside, he could see the blue-white star that the humans called Wolf 1061. In the distance, several human cargo ships were moving slowly along established trade routes. They looked harmless and ordinary, just as they had for the past 20 years. But something was wrong. The timing was too perfect. Just days after the Council had denied humanity full membership, military assets were disappearing throughout hegemony space. "Sir," his aide continued, "we're getting similar reports from the Crystalline Confederacy. They've lost 2 entire battle groups. The Aquatic Collective is reporting that their shipping lanes have been completely disrupted. Even the Silicon Brotherhood is having problems." The communicator on Vextar's desk began to chime. The sound was distorted, cutting in and out like a damaged transmission. After several attempts, a fuzzy image appeared on the screen. It was High Crystalline Zarath, the Confederacy's senior representative. "Vextar," the crystal being's voice rang with worry. "Are your forces experiencing difficulties?" "Yes. What about yours?" 6 hours ago, our main supply depot at Rigel simply went dark. No explosion, no battle, just silence. We sent a reconnaissance team to investigate. They found empty space where our base should have been. The transmission flickered and nearly cut out. When it stabilized, Vextar could see other council members trying to join the conversation. Admiral Gorthan of the Aquatic Collective appeared on screen, his gill slits fluttering with agitation. "My trade fleets are being targeted, the fish-like being reported. 7 merchant vessels have vanished in the last 4 hours. Each one was carrying critical supplies to our outer colonies. If this continues, we'll have systems running out of food and medical supplies within days." More council members joined the chaotic transmission. Each one reported similar losses. Military bases going offline, supply convoys disappearing, communication networks failing. The attacks were happening simultaneously across thousands of light-years of space. "This cannot be random," Vextar said. "Someone is coordinating these strikes." High Crystalline Zarath chimed in agreement. "But who? We have no major enemies capable of this kind of operation. The rebel groups in the outer territories lack the ships and technology. The rogue AI collective was destroyed decades ago." Vextar was about to respond when every screen in his chamber suddenly displayed the same image. A human face looked back at him with calm, confident eyes. It was Jake Morrison, but he was no longer wearing diplomatic robes. Instead, he wore a military uniform that Vextar had never seen before. The uniform was black with silver trim, featuring insignia that spoke of high rank and considerable authority. Behind Morrison stood other humans, all wearing similar uniforms. Vextar recognized none of them from previous diplomatic meetings. "Counselors," Morrison said in a voice that was completely different from his previous diplomatic tone. "I believe you're experiencing some technical difficulties." The transmission was crystal clear, unlike the broken communications the council members had been struggling with all morning. Morrison's image appeared on every screen throughout hegemony space, crystalline territory, aquatic worlds, and Silicon Brotherhood systems. For 23 years, you have treated humanity like children, Morrison continued. You have stolen our innovations and claimed them as your own. You have blocked our requests for equal representation while profiting from our labor. You assumed that our politeness meant weakness, that our patience meant stupidity. Behind Morrison, Vextar could see what looked like a military command center. Dozens of humans worked at advanced computer stations, monitoring displays that showed star maps, ship movements, and tactical data. The technology looked far more sophisticated than anything the Council used. "Allow me to introduce some people you haven't met before," Morrison said. He gestured to a stern-looking woman with short gray hair. "Admiral Lisa Grant, commander of Earth's Defense Forces." He indicated a thin man with glasses. "Dr. Tony Clark, director of our Xenological Defense Initiative." More humans stepped into view, each one introduced with titles that made Vextar's blood run cold. Military commanders, intelligence directors, weapons specialists. These were not the simple diplomats and researchers that the Council had been dealing with for decades. You see, counselors, the people you've been talking to were just our diplomatic corps. They were authorized to smile, nod, and make you feel comfortable. The real decisions were always made by others. Morrison's expression grew serious. "Today, that changes. You have 72 hours to reconvene the Council with full voting rights for humanity on the table. You will also remove all restrictions on human territories and trade routes." The transmission showed tactical displays that made Vextar's heart race. Human ships were positioned throughout the galaxy, far more than the Council had ever known existed. The vessels were sleek and predatory, nothing like the clumsy cargo haulers that humanity was supposed to be operating. "If you're wondering what happened to your missing ships and bases," Morrison said, "they're all intact and unharmed. We simply moved them to secure locations until this matter is resolved. Think of it as a demonstration of our capabilities." Vextar stared at the screen, in growing horror. Entire military installations had been moved without anyone noticing. How was that possible? What kind of technology could relocate massive structures through space? "After the deadline passes," Morrison continued, "we will stop being polite. You've never seen what humans are capable of when we're not trying to make you comfortable. Trust me, counselors, you don't want to find out." The transmission ended, leaving the Council members staring at blank screens. For several minutes, no one spoke. The silence was broken only by the static of their failing communication systems. Finally, Vextar managed to find his voice. "How many ships does humanity actually have?" Nobody answered because nobody knew. For 23 years, the Council had assumed they understood human capabilities. They had based their decisions on outdated information and arrogant assumptions. Now, they were facing an enemy they had created through their own stupidity. They had turned potential allies into opponents by treating them like servants. Worst of all, they had given that enemy decades to prepare while believing their own lies about human primitiveness. Admiral Gorthon broke the stunned silence with a question that terrified them all. "What do we do now, E?" The 72-hour deadline came and went like a whisper in space. The Galactic Council had spent those 3 days arguing, debating, and convincing themselves that the humans were bluffing. Surely no species could hide such advanced capabilities for so long. Surely the primitive Earth creatures were just using clever tricks to appear more dangerous than they really were. Counselor Vextar was in the middle of explaining this logic to his fellow council members when every light on their station went out. Emergency power should have activated within seconds. The backup life support system should have maintained atmosphere and gravity. Instead, the council members found themselves floating in complete darkness, gasping for air that was rapidly growing thin. For exactly 10 minutes, the most advanced space station in the galaxy became a tomb. Council members who had never experienced fear in their long lives suddenly understood what it meant to be helpless. They drifted in zero gravity, unable to see, unable to breathe properly, unable to do anything but wait. Then the lights came back on. Gravity returned. Air began flowing through the ventilation systems again. The council members crashed to the floor as their bodies remembered what weight felt like. Bextar pulled himself up and checked his personal communicator. Messages were flooding in from across the galaxy. Every council military base, every government station, every important facility had experienced the same 10-minute blackout. Millions of beings had been reminded of how fragile their civilization really was, but the humans had not stopped there. Admiral Gorthun's panicked voice came through the restored communication system. "They took my flagship. The entire ship just vanished from orbit around our homeworld. 30,000 crew members gone without a trace." High Crystalline Zarath chimed in with growing hysteria. "Our primary manufacturing station has disappeared. It was there this morning, now there's just empty space. How do you move a structure that size without anyone seeing it?" Similar reports came from every council member, ships vanishing from secure anchorages, space stations disappearing from their orbits, military installations simply ceasing to exist. Each loss represented years of construction and billions of credits in resources. Through it all, civilian traffic continued normally. Human cargo ships still moved along their trade routes as if nothing had happened. Human research stations continued broadcasting routine scientific data. Human diplomatic personnel went about their daily business with the same polite smiles they had always worn. It was as if two different versions of humanity existed: the harmless servants that the Council had always known, and the terrifying military force that had just demonstrated the ability to dismantle galactic civilization at will. Captain Amy Rodriguez watched the chaos from the bridge of her ship. The Silent Thunder still looked like a simple cargo hauler on the outside, but Amy's crew was monitoring Council communications and tracking the movements of enemy fleets throughout the galaxy. "Captain," her tactical officer reported, "the hegemony is trying to organize a response. They're pulling ships from Border Patrol to form a battle group." Amy smiled. "Let them come. How many ships are we talking about?" 43 vessels, including 2 dreadnoughts. They're moving to intercept us near the Kepler system." "Only 43? Amy shook her head in disappointment. "I was hoping for more of a challenge." Her ship looked like it was alone in space, but Amy knew better. 17 other human vessels were traveling alongside the Silent Thunder, hidden by technology that made them invisible to Council sensors. Each ship carried weapons that the aliens could not imagine, and defenses that would make their attacks useless. More importantly, Amy's fleet was not operating according to Council rules of warfare. While alien species built massive, slow-moving battleships designed for long-range bombardment, humans had developed something completely different. Commander. Sam Taylor was leading one of those revolutionary fleets near the Silicon Brotherhood's home system. His ships were small and fast, designed to work together like a school of fish or a flock of birds. Instead of trying to overpower enemy vessels with brute force, they used speed, coordination, and intelligence to confuse and overwhelm their targets. "All ships begin Phase 2, Sam broadcast to his squadron. "Let's show our Silicon friends what real technology looks like." His 12 ships suddenly appeared on Brotherhood sensors, emerging from what looked like empty space. The alien defenders immediately moved to engage, expecting a traditional battle between opposing fleets. They were not prepared for ships that could phase in and out of normal space at will. Sam's vessels appeared, fired precise shots that disabled enemy weapons, then vanished again before return fire could reach them. Within minutes, the entire Brotherhood defense fleet was floating helplessly in space, their systems dead but their crews unharmed. Similar engagements were happening throughout the galaxy. Human forces appeared wherever Council ships gathered, delivered swift defeats, then disappeared again into whatever dimension they used for travel. No shots were fired in anger, no lives were lost, but the message was clear. Resistance was pointless. Back on the Council station, Jake Morrison walked through corridors that should have been sealed against intruders. He was accompanied by Lieutenant Karen White and a squad of humans in armor that seemed to bend light around it. Station security tried to stop them, but their weapons simply passed through the humans without effect. "How are they doing that?" Vexitar whispered to his aide as he watched the humans approach through security cameras. I don't know, sir. Our energy weapons have no effect. Our physical barriers don't slow them down. It's like they're not entirely in our dimension. The council chamber doors opened without anyone touching the controls. Jake Morrison entered with the same calm confidence he had always shown as a diplomat, but now his true nature was visible. He was not a desperate petitioner seeking favor from superior beings. He was a predator who had been playing with his prey for decades. Counselors, Jake said, as he took a seat at their table without being invited. I trust you've had time to reconsider our offer. Vexitar found his voice first. You cannot simply take our military assets and expect us to negotiate. Can I? Jake asked mildly. Your ships and stations are safe. Your people are unharmed. We've demonstrated that we can disable your defenses whenever we choose. What exactly is stopping us from taking whatever we want? High Crystalline Zarath chimed desperately. This is an act of war against the entire Galactic Council. Jake laughed. No, Counselor. This is what an act of war looks like when humans are involved. He gestured to Lieutenant White, who activated a holographic display showing the current state of Council forces throughout the galaxy. Every military installation was marked in red, indicating complete neutralization. Every major fleet showed, as disabled or missing. Every strategic resource was now under human control. The display showed the complete collapse of Council military power in less than 4 days. Your problem, Jake continued, is that you never bothered to learn what humans are really capable of. You assumed that politeness meant weakness. You thought that because we asked nicely we had no other options. He stood up and walked to the chamber's viewing window. Outside, human ships were visible for the first time. They were sleek and deadly, with designs that seemed to flow like living things. Their hulls were made from materials that shifted and changed color as they moved. Let me make this simple, Jake said without turning around. You have 2 choices. You can accept humanity as an equal partner in galactic civilization, or you can try to maintain your old system without the military power to enforce it. He finally turned back to face the terrified council members. Either way, the age of human servitude is over. The only question is whether you want to be part of what comes next, or whether you prefer to become a historical footnote. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of more human ships arriving outside the station. Dr. Tony Clark entered the council chamber like a professor arriving to teach a particularly slow class. He carried a simple tablet and wore the same mild expression he had shown during 20 years of scientific conferences with alien researchers. But now the council members could see the intelligence burning behind his thick glasses. Counselors, Tony said as he activated his tablet, I think it's time we had an honest conversation about human development. A holographic display filled the chamber, showing what looked like Earth's technological progress over the past century. The aliens saw the familiar story they had been told many times. Humans discovering fire, inventing the wheel, eventually stumbling into space travel through crude chemical rockets. This is what we let you believe, Tony continued. Simple progression from primitive tools to basic spaceflight, very reassuring for species who needed to feel superior to the newcomers. The display changed, showing the real timeline of human development. The dates were completely different. Technologies that aliens thought humans had developed recently were actually centuries old. Achievements that seemed impossible were marked as completed decades before first contact. Vexitar stared at the display in growing horror. This cannot be accurate. We monitored your radio signals. We observed your early space missions. Tony smiled the patient smile of a teacher whose student had just asked exactly the right question. Yes, you did. We made sure you saw exactly what we wanted you to see. Radio broadcasts designed to make us look primitive. Rocket launches that appeared clumsy and inefficient. We gave you a show, Counselor, and you believed every minute of it. The display now showed human colonies throughout the galaxy, but the numbers were staggering. What the Council thought were 12 human worlds were actually 47. What looked like simple farming settlements were advanced manufacturing centers. What appeared to be research stations were actually military bases disguised with fake equipment. You see, Tony explained. "We learned about your species nearly a century before we made official first contact. We watched you, studied your cultures, analyzed your strengths and weaknesses. We knew exactly what kind of reception we would get if we approached as equals." High Crystalline Zarath chimed in confusion. "But your technology, your ships were so primitive when you first arrived." "No, they weren't." Tony called up images of the vessels that had first approached Council space decades earlier. These ships were specifically designed to look primitive. We built them using deliberately outdated technology and inefficient designs. Every rivet, every control panel, every engine component was calculated to make you feel superior. The display showed cutaway views of those early human ships. Hidden beneath their crude exteriors were advanced systems that the Council still did not understand. Quantum manipulation drives disguised as chemical rockets, molecular assemblers hidden inside what looked like simple tool storage. Artificial, intelligent systems more sophisticated than anything the aliens possessed, camouflaged as basic computer terminals. "While you were congratulating yourselves on mentoring a primitive species," Tony continued, "we were studying your weaknesses and planning for this exact moment." Admiral Gorthon's gill slits fluttered in panic. "The colonies, the ones we were supposed to supervise, are all military installations," Tony confirmed. "Every human farmer you met was actually a trained soldier. Every scientist was an intelligence operative. Every merchant was gathering information on your trade routes and defense systems." He brought up a map showing the true scope of human expansion. Transport networks connected human worlds through dimensions that Council science had never discovered. Manufacturing centers produced materials that should have been impossible to create outside laboratory conditions. Research facilities developed technologies that made Council achievements look like children's toys. The mining operation on Kepler 442b that you thought was extracting rare metals? Actually a sensor array monitoring all hegemony fleet movements. The agricultural research station near the Silicon Brotherhood? A weapons testing facility? The medical supply depot in aquatic space? An intelligence gathering center that's been recording your military communications for 15 years. Vextar's voice was barely a whisper. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since before we made first contact," Tony replied. "We knew that advanced species would either welcome us as equals or try to dominate us as inferiors. We prepared for both possibilities. You chose domination, so you get to see what we prepared for that scenario." The holographic display now showed the true size of human military forces. Ships that dwarfed anything the Council had ever built. Weapons that could disassemble matter at the molecular level. Defense systems that existed partially outside normal spacetime. An entire industrial civilization that had been hiding in plain sight for decades. "But the most important thing we learned about your species," Tony said as he walked around the chamber, "is that you're not actually as advanced as you pretend to be. Your technology is old and stagnant. Your military tactics haven't changed in centuries. Your entire civilization is built on the assumption that nothing will ever challenge your dominance." He stopped in front of Vextar and looked directly into the alien's yellow eyes. That assumption was wrong. The display changed one final time, showing what human civilization actually looked like when it stopped hiding. Cities that existed in folded space, occupying areas larger than planets while remaining invisible to outside observers. Factories that could transform raw energy into any material needed. Ships that moved through dimensions where distance had no meaning. This is what we really are, counselors. Everything you've seen before today was theater designed to keep you comfortable while we prepared for the inevitable confrontation. Commander Sam Taylor's voice came through the chamber's communication system. "Dr. Clark, we're receiving surrender requests from 17 different Council fleets. What are your orders?" Tony looked at the terrified alien leaders. "Accept their surrenders. Treat all personnel with respect and dignity. Make sure they understand that this is not conquest, it's correction." He turned back to the Council members. "You see, we don't want to rule your species. We never did. All we wanted was to be treated as equals. But since you couldn't manage that simple courtesy, we're going to restructure galactic civilization so that equality is mandatory rather than optional." Jake Morrison entered the chamber, followed by Admiral Lisa Grant and dozens of other humans that the Council had never seen before. They wore uniforms that spoke of authority and competence, carrying themselves with the confidence of beings who had just won a war without firing a shot in anger. "The question now," Jake said as he took his place at the head of the council table, "is whether you want to be part of the solution or part of the history lesson." Outside the chamber's windows, more human ships continued to arrive. They filled the space around the station like a metallic constellation, their hulls gleaming with technologies that made the council's greatest achievements look like primitive toys. For the first time in their species' history, the Galactic Council was no longer in control of the galaxy. The age of human deference was over, and the age of human leadership had begun. The only question remaining was how gracefully the former masters of the galaxy would accept their new role as equals in a civilization they no longer controlled. The transformation of galactic civilization happened faster than anyone expected. Within weeks of humanity's revelation, the old council system began to collapse under its own weight. Species that had spent centuries believing in their natural superiority suddenly found themselves dependent on human technology they could not understand or replicate. Jake Morrison sat in what had once been Councillor Vextar's chair, but the entire chamber had been redesigned. The old circular arrangement that put some species above others had been replaced with a level amphitheater, where every representative had an equal voice. The cold metal and sharp edges had given way to warm materials and comfortable seating designed to fit dozens of different body types. "The motion before us today," Jake announced to the assembled delegates, "is the proposal to establish manufacturing centers in the Outer Rim territories. All species with colonies in that region will have equal access to the facilities." It was a routine matter now, but 6 months ago it would have been impossible. Under the old system, the dominant species would have claimed the best locations and forced others to beg for access. Now decisions were made based on practical needs and fair distribution, rather than ancient prejudices. Admiral Lisa Grant watched the proceedings from the observation deck. The sight of former enemies working together still amazed her. The crystalline Confederacy was sharing mineral extraction techniques with species they had considered beneath notice. The Aquatic Collective was helping desert worlds develop water recycling systems. Even the Silicon Brotherhood had begun teaching their advanced mathematics to anyone willing to learn. The change had not been entirely voluntary. When human engineers introduced manufacturing techniques that could create any material from basic energy, the old economic systems based on scarcity had become meaningless overnight. Species that had built their power on controlling rare resources found themselves with nothing to control. Some had adapted better than others. The Silicon Brotherhood, impressed by human mathematical achievements, had quickly moved to establish research partnerships. Their ancient pride and intellectual superiority had transformed into genuine curiosity about what humans could teach them. High crystalline Zarath had become an unexpected ally. The living crystal being had been fascinated by human music of all things. The mathematical relationships in human compositions had opened new ways of thinking that helped the Crystalline Confederacy advance their own art forms. The Aquatic Collective had initially resisted the changes, but their attitude shifted when human environmental engineers helped them restore 3 dying ocean worlds in less than a month. Technologies that would have taken the collective decades to develop were implemented in days. But not everyone had accepted the new reality gracefully. Vextar still attended council sessions, but his role had been reduced to representing his species rather than ruling over others. The hegemony's vast military machine had become irrelevant when human defensive systems made traditional warfare obsolete. Their economy had collapsed when human manufacturing made their slave labor unnecessary. "Ambassador Morrison," Vextar said when the current motion had been voted on and passed, "I request permission to address the council." Jake nodded. Even former enemies deserved the right to speak under the new system. Vextar stood slowly, his 4 arms trembling with barely controlled rage. "You have destroyed everything we built. Thousands of years of progress wiped away by primitives who learned to use tools yesterday." The chamber fell silent. Many species still struggled with the reality that humans were not the simple creatures they had appeared to be. Some, like Vexitar, could not accept it at all. "Your hegemony built its progress on the backs of slave species," Jake replied calmly. Your thousands of years of advancement were purchased with the suffering of billions of beings. That was never sustainable. We brought order to chaos, Vextar insisted. We created civilization from primitive tribalism. Without strong leadership, the galaxy will fall into anarchy. Jake stood and walked to the center of the chamber. Around him, representatives from 43 different species watched with interest. These beings had learned to work together in ways that the old council had never achieved. Look around you, counselor, Jake said. Do you see anarchy? Do you see chaos? Or do you see species that were never allowed to reach their full potential, finally getting the chance to contribute? He gestured to a delegate from the verdant Commonwealth, a plant-based species that had been dismissed as decorative fixtures under the old system. The verdant have developed atmospheric processors that can terraform dead worlds in months instead of centuries. But you never asked them to contribute because you assumed they were too primitive to have valuable ideas. Jake pointed to another delegate, this one from a species of small furry beings that the hegemony had used as servants. The Softpaw Collective has created art forms that help traumatized species heal from psychological damage. Their emotional intelligence surpasses anything we've seen before, but you used them as waiters and cleaners because you thought they were only good for menial labor. More examples followed. Species after species that had been overlooked or oppressed by the old system were now making contributions that benefited everyone. Without the artificial restrictions imposed by the dominant powers, the galaxy's smaller civilizations had begun to flourish. Your mistake, Jake said as he faced Vextar directly, was believing that power meant dominance. You thought that being in control meant keeping others down. Humanity learned something different. The main display screen activated, showing images of human worlds both old and new. But these were not military installations or industrial centers. They were communities where dozens of species lived and worked together, sharing knowledge and building something greater than any one civilization could achieve alone. Real power comes from cooperation, Jake continued. Real strength comes from diversity. The galaxy is more prosperous now, more innovative, more peaceful than it has been in thousands of years. And it happened the moment we stopped letting bullies run the show. Vextar's yellow eyes blazed with fury, but he had no response. The evidence was overwhelming. Trade was flourishing between species that had barely communicated before. Scientific breakthroughs were happening daily as different forms of intelligence tackled problems from multiple angles. Even military conflicts had virtually disappeared as the new economic systems removed most reasons for war. Captain Amy Rodriguez watched the exchange from her position near the chamber entrance. The former warship captain now served as head of HFY Galactic Security, but her job had become remarkably easy. When every species had access to the same advanced technology and manufacturing capabilities, there was little reason for conflict. Dr. Tony Clark entered the chamber carrying a data pad filled with the day's reports. Colony establishment requests, research proposals, cultural exchange programs. The paperwork of a thriving civilization rather than the crisis management that had dominated the old council's time. Admiral Morrison, Tony said formally, though Jake had asked him to drop the titles months ago. We have the final numbers from the integration program. The last of the hegemony's tributary species have established independent governments. They're requesting admission to the Federation as full members. Jake smiled. The Terran Federation was what they had decided to call the new galactic government. Not because humans were in charge, but because the first meeting of equals had taken place. On Earth, every species had contributed to its structure and principles. Any objections from the floor? Jake asked the assembled delegates. There were none. Even Vextar remained silent, though his expression suggested he was grinding his teeth. Then welcome our new members, Jake announced. The Federation now includes representatives from 87 different species and over 300 worlds. As the session concluded and delegates began filing out, Vextar approached Jake one final time. The proud alien's shoulders were slumped in defeat. You have won, he said quietly. But answer me this. What happens when your own people become corrupt? What happens when humans decide they deserve to rule others? Power corrupts everyone eventually. Jake considered the question seriously. It was something that had kept him awake many nights since taking on his new role. Maybe you're right, he admitted. Maybe humans will eventually become as arrogant as you were. But there's one important difference between us and you. What difference is that? Jake smiled and gestured to the diverse group of beings working together in the chamber around them. We taught everyone else how to do what we do. Every species in the Federation now has access to the same technology, the same knowledge, the same capabilities that humans possess. If we ever forget our place, they'll be ready to remind us. He walked away, leaving Vextar alone with the weight of understanding. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had liberated it, then shared the tools of liberation with everyone else. It was perhaps the most terrifying thing they could have done to their former oppressors.